Hi, everybody. We'll just give folks maybe a couple more minutes to join. All right. So it looks like we do have quorum. So I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order at 1:02 p.m. on March 1st, 2022. We'll go ahead and start off with introductions. Una Thone, Chair of the Council, and then I'll just kind of go through, and once I call on you, or actually everybody needs to do it on their own. Sorry about that, because we have to say whether or not somebody is with us. So nobody's in the meeting with me. So we'll go in order of how our names appear on the agenda. And I think Mary is up next, but I don't see Mary. So we'll go to you, Roy.
Roy Avi, no one's here with me.
Thanks, Roy. Steph?
She just sent a message saying she'd be late.
Okay, sorry about that.
Hi, everyone. Just shoveling some food in my mouth. Aloha, Steph, Dan Barco. No, nobody is with me either.
Thank you, Steph. All right, Dawn.
Dawn Hager Nordblom, no one's with me at the moment.
Okay, Maka'ala.
And I am alone.
Thank you. Okay, Robin.
Robin K. I'm all by myself right now.
Thank you. Tessie.
Tessie Kinnaman, I'm all alone.
Thanks, Tessie. Okay, Ron.
Ron Terry Solo.
And Mike. Oh, you're on mute, Mike. Hey, Mike, are you able to get off mute?
No one's with me.
Okay, thank you, Mike. All right, and Mahina.
Hello, everyone. Mahina Tudor. No one's here with me.
All right, thank you, everybody. Let's go to our ERP folks. Les, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Les Segundo. I'm here by myself in the LUC conference room.
Okay, and Mary Alice.
I am here by myself. Thank you.
Jody.
Hi, I'm here by myself, Jody Yee with the Attorney General's office, and I'm here by myself. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody. And we have one guest today. Justine, if you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself. And for Chapter 92 purposes, we do have to let folks know whether or not there's anybody else in the room with us.
I think that only applies to members of the council, but I'm here. My name is Justine Nihipali. I'm the manager of the Coastal Zone Management Program, which is also housed in the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. Happy to be here today. Thank you for inviting me, but I am alone in this premises. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So, you know, if the members are okay, I would like to defer item 2, review and approval of the meeting minutes, until after we take up the director's report. Is everyone okay with that? Yeah. Okay. So Mary Alice, if you can go ahead and take over now. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask Justine Nihipali to talk about how the use of cumulative impacts was incorporated into our guidance to the county planning departments that have CZM staff, coastal zone management staff that that work with applications for shoreline management area permits and comment on coastal zone area impacts. Go ahead, Justine.
Thanks, Mary Alice. Yes, thank you so much for that introduction. I do recognize quite a few people and names who have been involved with the Coastal Zone Management Program for a number of years, some who've helped to establish the program in the late 70s, and then people who have also served on our Marine and Coastal Zone Advocacy Council. So it's very nice to see you all again. But for those people who aren't familiar with the Coastal Zone Management Program, the Coastal Zone Management Program is often called the policy umbrella for environmental policy and regulations. It's a network of entities, meaning that the program was founded on existing departments and their enforceable rules and policies related to environmental management. And so therefore the program itself is more than just me and my staff here at OPSD. It is the county planners that make decisions relating to special management area decisions. It is also the rules and regulations at the Department of Health, DLNR, Land Use Commission, as well as HRS 343 and HAR 11200.1. So among many others. So that's kind of the definition of what the CZM program is. We are federally funded, established by Coastal Zone Management Act, which is administered through the NOAA Office for Coastal Management. And our funding is primarily sourced from federal funding to facilitate this program. Is it okay, Les? Would you be able to let me share my screen?
Yeah.
Thank you. We put together a short little video. I just wanted to share it because we haven't been able to share it very often. And trying to get the share sound part right. I'm gonna try this.
Okay.
Okay. Can you hear the audio?
Yeah.
When it comes to protecting Hawaii's coastal environment, there are plenty of challenges. Here, there is no point of land further than 30 miles from the ocean. And from Mauka to Makai, people put a tremendous amount of pressure on the environment. Also, when you add the impacts of climate change and natural hazards, it becomes even more challenging to manage the state's natural resources. And everyone has different responsibilities and ideas about how to do that. So, the Hawaii Coastal Zone Management Program, or CZM, gathers mana'o from everyone using scientific data, local expertise, and indigenous knowledge to make important decisions. CZM provides an opportunity for government agencies, community organizations, and individuals to work together on creating a balanced environment. It is the kuleana of all of us to care for our environment, and together we can protect and sustainably manage our coastal environment for thriving communities, now and into the future. To learn more, visit planning.hawaii.gov.
Thank you for allowing me to share that. We like to get as many plays as we can. But today, Mary Alice specifically asked me to share, I'm sorry, hold on one second. It has automatically started playing a finance hearing committee at the ledge. Okay, it's closed. And Mary Alice asked me to specifically today to speak to a guidance that we issue to the county planning departments for the administration of special management area permits. And I think she was particularly interested in this because of the nexus between HRS 343 and the administrative rules, as well as the SMA. So the reason why we developed this guidance, which addresses cumulative effects and an impacts assessment specifically for SMA permitting, is because under federal law, the coastal zone management programs across the nation are required to be evaluated on a regular basis. And our most recent evaluation was conducted in 2018, in which both stakeholders that were interviewed as well as county partners in the state of Hawaii expressed that it's been extremely hard to determine what cumulative impacts in the special management area permitting process is. And that results in community members being frustrated, and that refined guidance would be helpful in decision making. Considering potential cumulative effects in SMA permitting is required by coastal zone management law in Hawaii Revised Statutes, Chapter 205A. Counties are responsible for establishing and identifying and defending their consideration of cumulative impacts or effects in SMA permitting. And the purpose of the guidance that we developed was to provide policy and implementation support to assist the counties to better assess and determine cumulative impacts in their SMA permitting processes. So our wonderful SMA coordinator, Dr. Si-Chow Lee, in response to the NOAA evaluation findings and recommendations, applied a very broad approach and procedures to prepare the guidance. He reviewed the requirements for cumulative impact assessments and available guidance from NEPA and HEPA, and did a call out to our sister entities across the states for how they assess cumulative impacts at other CZM programs. He also conducted quite an extensive research process on final EAs and final EISs that were conducted under HEPA to review the cumulative impact assessments within those environmental documents. I think he reviewed over 1,000. So, you know, Tom Eisen, thanks for putting all of those up there. And there are a lot of things that are happening in the state. And then he also worked with our county planning departments to discuss cumulative impact assessments and some of what the challenges are. And we've ultimately recommended parameters and criteria to help, to some extent, assess cumulative impacts in SMA permitting. You're all likely familiar with both the terms cumulative impact and significant effect, as they're identified and defined in HRS Chapter 343 and Administrative Rules Chapter 11-200-.1, which I assume you know better than I do. And then Section 13 further established the significance criteria for determining whether an action might have a significant effect on the environment. Our chapter, Chapter 205A, doesn't actually provide a definition of cumulative impact and significant effect. They are the definitions and criteria for determining significant effect and cumulative impact are applicable, we feel, in SMA permitting. Counties and their authorities may apply the definitions to assess potential effects and impacts resulting from any of the uses, activities, or operations within permit exemptions, within determinations relative to use permits, minor permits, and exemptions. So for this purpose, for decision making, the application of the significance criteria is constrained to the CZM objectives and policies, as well as the SMA guidelines, which are within HRS 205A. So some of the challenges and the regarding developing this guidance, assessing cumulative impacts is challenging, primarily because of the difficulty of defining the geographic or spatial parameters, as well as the temporal parameters or boundaries. And so there's no like single universal formula that's available for determining an appropriate scope and extent. So it is quite difficult to establish and make that case. But we've kind of worked on using spatial and temporal boundaries as two critical parameters to scope both the past, present, and reasonably foreseeable future actions, which depends really on the scale of the proposed actions, as well as how those impacts will affect the natural resources and the environment. Ideally, the intent is that the scopes to assess cumulative impact or impact assessments should be expanded to the point at which specific coastal resources are no longer significantly affected, or impacts are no longer of interest to affected parties. But it's really noted that both NEPA and HEPA have faced a lot of difficulty in providing guidance as to how to conduct these assessments to meet the requirements. A lack of feasible spatial and temporal parameters have made assessing the cumulative impacts pretty challenging, not only in SMA, but also in evaluations for EAs and EISs. I mentioned before that Dr. Lee reviewed over 1,000 EAs and EISs finals from the period of August 2008 to April 2020. And he notes that in very few cases, these final EAs and EISs specifically discussed or applied spatial and temporal parameters. Approximately 96% of the final EAs and EISs referred to the definition of cumulative impact, and then made a statement that there was no adverse cumulative effects or impacts for their proposed projects. How this relates to our guidance, for SMA criteria, environmental assessments and EIS review crosses jurisdictional bounds, as you know, and is intended to study all the environmental effects and impacts associated with an action. If an EA or EIS serves as the supporting document to fulfill SMA use permit applications, our office suggests that the subject EA or EISs specifically include a cumulative impacts, effects or impacts assessment on the coastal resources under HRS 205A. So what our office has included in this guidance is that a recommendation to the counties to apply temporal and spatial parameters with SMA criteria to account for cumulative effects or impacts of the proposed action on the SMA with kind of the following parameters. A minimum of 5 years before the application to scope past actions, a minimum of 5 years from the application and up to the lifespan of a proposed project to scope for foreseeable actions. And so that's sort of a minimum threshold. Certainly can be expanded if the county determines that there is a larger effect. Some other parameters are extension of the SMA inland boundary as a geographic radius to scope other actions that might contribute to cumulative effects. And then, and it may go beyond the SMA boundary if we're talking about a specific coastal resource, if necessary. And then ensuring that the assessment is focused on coastal resources under the CZM objectives and policies, as well as the SMA guidelines.
Justine, do we ask questions?
Yes, I'm just about to finish up though.
Okay.
So thanks, Ron. So just very general, what we've thus recommended kind of cumulatively, very good, is a checklist to include incremental impacts on coastal resources and the environment resulting from what the proposed actions are under the SMA criteria. They're also encouraged to develop any of their own implementation and policies and tools to standardize cumulative effects in SMA permitting. requesting a location map of the past, present, and reasonably foreseeable future actions that have been identified under the as feasible spatial and temporal parameters, which we discussed earlier, for the purposes of a cumulative effects and impacts assessment. And so we've recommended that it may also include repeated repairs and component actions that are phased or increments of what a larger action will be. So kind of just wanted to highlight the nexus connections between the work that you guys are doing and help to advise the former chair of OEQC before you guys became ERP, and developing and updating the administrative rules, and how we've utilized some of those outcomes as well as federal definitions and assessments into one of our requirements that NOAA recommended that we pursue in our 2018 evaluation.
Thanks, Justine.
Thanks.
Go ahead. Was Ron first?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Justine, I've done a lot of cumulative impacts analysis myself, and probably engaged in various exercises. It's very difficult, and I commend you guys for trying to tackle this. I do have to say that I'll bring up an example of one I did for the Saddle Road extension down to from the center of the island down to the bottom, which hasn't been done yet, but the cumulative impacts analysis I did. And it was an exercise that took about 3 months to do. It was not a trivial activity. And all I addressed were the really major projects that were in the immediate past, and foreseeable future, and look at the impacts primarily of concern. You really have to put some boundaries on this thing, or it starts to get insane. It's difficult enough to analyze the effects of one action, that you're building, whatever it is, versus the effects of hundreds of past actions, hundreds of future actions for which you may not have much data. Somebody built a house 2 doors over. What do you know about that? Not much. It's not even easy to find out about that. The data requirements soon will require a level of effort that is orders of magnitude beyond what a simple EA would be. So that means orders of magnitude of time and cost as well. And you must consider this, for practical reasons when you're doing it. Have you thought about that? And if so, what's your response?
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. That has been a really difficult decision for us to make in our program. I will pass this on. This is still currently in draft form. I will pass this on to Dr. Lee. That's, I think, why we established a minimum threshold of 5 years versus a maximum or a higher threshold, because 5 years seems like something that would have enough data available. But I will pass that information in terms of the difficulties in order of magnitude related to actions that you might not be able to define or find information on, and we can sort of assess it from there as well.
Yeah, again, I would just suggest that you have some sort of a lot of language about being reasonable, feasible, the scale of actions, the relationship between an action in the past 4 years ago, 10 miles down the coast, to the action that you're talking about. And if you're talking about a very large action, then you'd have a higher scale. If somebody's putting up a keiki playground in Waikiki, and you're looking at 5 years of data on the island of Oahu, and trying to analyze, every single family home that was built, every drainage project, every airport repair. I think you can see where it starts to become, goes to insanity.
Thank you for that feedback, Ron.
Ron, those are really good comments, and I agree with everything you said. I guess since you folks are still working on this, I would, even having a minimum of 5 years, like that could be too long for certain projects, like Ron said. So, consider that language. I mean, yeah, I guess if you guys add in the reasonableness language that Ron mentions, that could help. But even with 343, right, in terms of looking at cumulative impacts, you're looking at the additive effect of your project to existing conditions. So, in some cases, it might be reasonable to look back, but in others, it might not be. And that's not, if I recall correctly, and Ron knows this better than I do, right? Looking back is not exactly the starting place for a 343 document. So I think I realize that, what's done for the SMA is a little different, even though you do use 343 documents, but it's not truly, a 343 analysis. So I think that does cause some problems just in terms of the folks preparing those documents and how you're looking at the data and then what's expected for the process. So yeah, if you can just take that into consideration.
Thank you.
And thank you for your presentation. That was very informative.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here.
Anybody else have any questions, comments for Justine? I guess my last question would be, Justine, I know, so this guidance, you folks are still working on it. Once it's ready, where would members of the public be able to access this, or this is just going to be going to the planning departments?
This is to help inform the procedures for SMA permit assessments. So we typically provide that to the county planning departments. It's not I mean, it could probably be provided if requested, but it's not intended to be something that is for public consumption necessarily. Because it is combined, it is going to be combined with 4 other prior guidances that we've issued to the counties, including like changes to 205A relating to Act 16 of 2020, which prohibited seawalls for private residences with beaches, et cetera. So it's more related to permitting planners to assess what comes in for the applications.
Thank you. All right. Questions, comments from anybody else? No. Well, again, thank you, Justine.
Sorry, I have a question.
Right.
So these are guidelines. So who's going to enforce it? Is it the county planning folks that are supposed to comment on it if the documents are deficient in this area?
Yes, so the counties are the authorities for the SMAs within their own jurisdictions. The Office of Planning does the permitting specific to community development districts in Kalaeloa, Heia, and Kaka'ako, Makai.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else? Well, thanks again, Justine and Mary Alice, for organizing this. We appreciate it. It's very, very good information, very good presentation.
Thank you for your feedback, and thank you for everything you do for this council. I appreciate it. Take care.
Bye. I mean, you're welcome to stay on if you want. All right. So let's go back now to agenda item number 2. If everybody can take, maybe we'll do 5 minutes to look at meeting minutes. If we need a little bit longer, we can talk about that. So it's 1:30 now. Let's come back at 1:35. And thank you, Les, for working on the meeting minutes.
Well, you're welcome.
Mahina, I miss your beautiful background. Onana, do you want a motion?
Yes, please. I'll entertain a motion. Yeah, we're at 1:35 now.
I move that the minutes of the December meeting. be approved.
November.
I'm sorry, I move that the minutes of the November meeting be approved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Tessie. Okay, any discussion? I do actually have a couple of nits just at the top of page 6. The heading discussion of potential amendments to HR 11-200, they repeat, so I think you can delete one of those. And then in that paragraph that follows, the second sentence, I think the word review should be reviewed. So if Robin, you're okay with, moving to approve as amended, or does anybody else have any amendments? Sorry, revision. All right. Okay, so with that friendly amendment, are you okay with that, Robin and Tessie?
Yes.
All right, so I'll go ahead and call the question. All those in favor of approving the November 2021 meeting minutes as amended, please raise your hand. Let's see, are we unanimous? We are unanimous, so we don't need to do a roll call. Thank you, everyone. Okay, next up on our agenda, we did not have an exemption committee meeting, but I left the space in case, Ron, you did want to give an update. Do you have anything to update as of right now?
Yeah, just one little thing, and that's that the Board of Water Supplies draft exemption list was published in the environmental notice on February 8th. And thank you, Les and Tom, for doing that. And although it's been 15 days since then, we didn't have enough time to get all the comments together and or anything. So we hope to get that together for the April meeting, a very brief item.
Great, thank you, Ron. Does anybody have any questions for Ron? Is there any public testimony? Okay, and I will know Panamea Tonga joined us, I think right before Justine began her presentation. So for the record. Okay, Mahina, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you for the Rules Committee update. Thanks, Ron.
Thanks, Onana. We had a Rules Committee this morning, and we, so as you all know, we've been going through the process of trying to come up with amendments for our procedural rules. And we had a few kind of big lingering questions for Jody in the AG's office that we had to resolve before moving forward. So today we discussed whether we retain the authority to do rulemaking, whether we retain the authority to do deck rulings, and just one other issue kind of about our power to appoint hearing officers, which had kind of been resolved, but it was just a cleanup thing. So our next steps at this point are Jody's gonna kind of get together with OP and figure out what power they have, what power we have, so that we can basically move forward. I don't know if I should say more than that or if that suffices for this report.
I guess that's enough for now. I think there's still just some lingering questions on what to do with our procedural rules, right? Because HB 1318 took away our rulemaking authority, which really went to the EIS rules under 343. And so I think there's an outstanding question, what if anything, we can even do with our procedural rules. So that's what's pending. Jody's gonna do some research for us and get back to us. Okay. Any public testimony on this? Any questions or discussion from council members? Okay, well, thank you so much, Mahina and Jody, for doing that research for us. Okay, Mary's not here today. I don't know if anybody else from INO, there was no INO meeting today. I left a spot in case there was an update that needed to be made. No?
I don't think so. I think Mary's waiting for the report from the Strategic Planning Committee, or PIG, whatever that session is. So I think we're just waiting to see. Oh, and I did talk to Kauai County regarding doing a session, not necessarily with HCPO, but like a session outside. And they said they would prefer us not to be in the HCPO agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. Thanks for looking into that.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions, comments on Dawn's update? Public testimony? Okay, so we'll get on to the kind of juicy portions of the agenda. And Robin, I'll leave it to you because you're presenting both, right? Do you want to take the PIG matter first and go into ledge, or vice versa?
I think we might as well do the PIG because that's not going to take very long. The legislative part, hopefully we'll have some real good discussion. So if that's okay with you, let's do the PIG thing first.
Yeah. Does anybody object to moving agenda item 8 ahead of agenda item 7? No? Okay, take it away.
Okay, really, this is, we talked about what the strategic planning forum would look like at the last meeting, but we are required to get formal approval of that at this meeting. So and thank you, Les, for including the attached report of the PIG. It was submitted last time. Now we're just approving it. Basically, I hate to waste time in walking you through it. Are there any questions on how this is going to work next month? I thought it was pretty straightforward, but
Yeah, I guess how are we doing in terms of the planning for it?
Well, this is the planning for it. I mean, this is the process, and this is the questions we're going to be using during the conversation. I've reached out to Scott, who said it's on his calendar. I've been unable to get any response from Denise. I was going to personally invite the 4 new appointees, even though they haven't been appointed, but they still are part of the public. So, and let them know what we've settled here. We need to settle a couple of administrative things today that I've recommended in general, but we're going to need a start time, and I would like you all to approve the concept of the 4 hours with the break. So, yeah, I don't know how much more planning you wanted. Oh, no.
No, I think just knowing that somebody is tracking that down, who's going to be handling setting up the Zoom link and the invites, and yeah.
Well, I'll do those 6 invites, and you're welcome, all of you, to ask. I mean, obviously we talked about this. It's open to the public. So if you want to encourage people to participate, just I would please encourage you as the facilitator to be sensitive to quantity. It's going to be really difficult to do a substantive strategic planning forum with the 10 of us or the 9 of us, whatever, and a lot more people, even though they're allowed to be there. So just be sensitive to that. I would also ask Les, I assumed you would be the manager of this administratively in terms of the Zoom. Since I don't think we're going to need any breakout rooms. It's just going to be a regular meeting, but with a lot of discussion.
Okay.
Thank you, Les. I will be the facilitator. I post in my report of the PIG. You saw the rules that we will use. I will limit you as the facilitator to 3 minutes at a time. I will try and keep the discussion going. I will invite people who might not have spoken to speak. And I will try and keep us on target to the agenda. My question, I think the administrative question is, how does it sound to do 10 to 12, then a half-hour break, and then 12:30 to 2:30? It'd be 4 hours. Are you all comfortable with that?
Yeah, I think that's fine. And Steph, go ahead.
I just, and apologies if I missed it, but do we have a date picked out for this yet?
Yeah, it's the next regular meeting of the council. There was some legislation we'll talk about in terms of retreats, but it's ongoing conversation. It's so we're going to do this as a regular EAC meeting.
So this would be the 12th of April?
April 5th.
Oh boy, okay.
Yeah, so that's why I had a tentative on our agenda for our next meeting. It has April 5th tentative 1 to 3 because I wanted to get confirmation from the strategic planning committee on, what time they'd want to do the retreat, since that was the date that was out there for that. I mean, how's everybody's schedule looking that day?
So is everybody going to be all right with that? 10 to 12 and then 12:30 to 2:30? Can you all shake your heads?
All right, I'm going to be on the Big Island in the forest, all the 4th through the 6th. So I will not be able to make the 5th. But if others, I'm only one, so encourage us to stick with that if it's just me.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, we'd love everybody to be there. And Mary's not here today either, so we really can't check her schedule.
Well, she was involved in the planning with this, so I'm assuming. Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to assume Mary can participate on that date. Is everybody else okay with that date? Can you all just shake your heads either way and let me know?
Yeah.
I would miss about an hour of it in the morning just because I have a standing meeting at 10. But other than that, I'm fine.
Well, I'm arbitrarily saying 10. I mean, we could do it 11 to 1, take a break, and then 1:30 to 3:30, if that would fit your. We're short, and I really want as much input from the members as possible. So I don't. Onana, do you have any problem with moving it back an hour?
Not with my schedule, as long as everybody else. I know for stuff, it won't work for her, but if everybody else can attend. So it's our normal meeting times in any event, right? On the first Tuesday, right. So I'm okay with it.
So 11 to 1 and then 1:30 to 3:30. You shake your heads, everybody. Dawn, you good? Roy? Okay. Okay, well, let's do it that way.
Oh, I have a question. So are we trying to hold committee meetings and also the regular meeting, I guess? No,
so I think we would skip the only one that was an exception. I think Ron, and let me know, because I know when we had talked about this previously, you did want to have just a little, was it you that needed a little time in the beginning of the meeting for approval of an exemption list, right?
I think we can do it in 5 minutes.
Okay, and did you actually need a committee meeting that day, or it's just, the approval at?
Our process involves a committee, so maybe we need a committee meeting too.
Okay. A quick one from like 10 to 10:30, or let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even
Okay.
less.
What is that? Less than that?
Yeah, could probably do it in 20 minutes.
Okay. Yes, so Roy, back to your question, other than that, no other committees meetings would be planned for that day. I think for the exemptions, we just got to get that list moving through the process.
Okay.
Okay. Is that okay with the other committees? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I hope all of you have had a chance to look through it. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward conversation. It's going to be based on, given our statutory responsibilities, what can we do? How do we do it best? How do we stretch what limited resources we have? How do we communicate the limitations and the capacities of the EAC to our communities at large? So you need to bring your thinking, your history, your community to this conversation. And again, my facilitation rule is there is no bad idea except mine. So I encourage all of you to be as Maka'ala will be, which is outspoken and opportunistic in making your point. And we got to do that. That's what this is all about. We're not looking for decision-making at this. The strategic planning committee will be charged with taking our discussion and creating a plan. I always strive for consensus if possible in these kinds of conversations, and consensus to me is it won't kill you to live with it. So we'll use that as kind of a guide. So that's it. I want to get to the legislative committee because that's a lot longer. Any questions on how we're going to do this, people's role, Onana's role, Roy's got a piece, and then everybody's just going to get a chance to talk. Maka'ala?
I particularly appreciate consensus, as you well know, and I prefer the term seasoned.
The term what?
Seasoned, to as we all know, Maka'ala was. But we've been doing this for many, many years, Robin. Yeah, and I really appreciate consensus planning, and want to thank you for stepping up to facilitate, because you're pretty good at it.
Thank you. We can have that conversation after the next meeting. But I just want to apologize in advance. I'll remind you at the meeting that I'm going to be kind of a hard ass if we have a lot of people on this, because we got to get everybody a chance to talk. So anything else before we move on? We need a formal vote to approve. Onana, would it be to approve the final report? Is that how we do it?
Yep, so we have an action item today. I'll go ahead and move to approve the final report of the strategic planning forum permitted interaction group dated February 1st, 2022. Do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, a lot of people. We'll take you, Mike, since you got your voice in there. All right, any further discussion on the final PIG report? Okay, and any members of the public, do you have any comments? All right. Well, in that case, I'll go ahead and call the question. All those in favor of approving the PIG report, please raise your hand. Okay. All right. And we are unanimous. Thank you, folks, for moving through that. And thank you again, Robin, for handling the logistics. I'll work with you on getting the agenda out for that day. Because it will include the exemption stuff, and thank you for working with Les on whatever needs to go out in terms of Zoom invites for everyone. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna quickly go over to, it's gonna go back to you, Robin, to lead us through the legislative committee update. A lot of stuff going on at the ledge this year, so I'm hoping we have about an hour and a half, a little bit more to go through it. And it's all you now, Robin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Onana. A little bit of background. You got the chart. Again, that reflects my initial search looking for the word environment and introduced in the 2022 It's very possible that I missed some. Mary Alice has pointed out some. Makala, you pay great attention to this. So if I missed any in this discussion, just bring them up. What I wanted to do was go through, given the amount of time we have, go through the ones that are in red first, because I found those, I shouldn't say the legislative committee found those to be the most relevant to our discussion. There's hundreds, thousands of bills, but we've narrowed it down to 8 or 9 for today's conversation. When we finish going through those, we can certainly go back to any of the others or any that aren't even on here. So I'm just trying to manage the conversation. What I'm looking for in this conversation is for the council to say whether it indeed wants to take a position, and then if so, what that position would be. But let me be really clear, that in no way prohibits you from, as an individual, testifying. If we say on Senate Bill 3495, we don't want to testify, but Makala, you feel really strongly about it, go for it. There's already a couple of examples of that Onana and I have testified on as individuals, because we just couldn't wait for this conversation to go on, and I'll bring you through that. And I'm sure that some of you have already testified individually on other bills as well. So that's really what I wanted to do, was go through the ones that are in red first, get a sense from you on if you wanted, as a council, to testify, if so, what position. And I'm going to encourage those of you to speak out in this today, to also be willing to help draft some of the comments. You don't have to cross the T's and dot the I's, but Onana is really busy. Me, not so much, but I'm not as great a writer or a presenter as she is. So we just want to be sensitive to how we do that. So let's start. First of all, is that okay? Everybody comfortable with what we're going to do today? That makes sense? Okay. All right. So the first one on the list, and this is updated as of yesterday in terms of where they are, but even today, some things have changed and I haven't had a chance to update it. So the first one I wanted us to look at was HB 1750. And that is where it makes the new construction of affordable housing eligible for exemption from environmental impact statements and environmental assessment requirements if it meets certain requirements. This is a bill that Onana has testified on as an individual. We've had some communication with some legislators with us on this. There's been a lot of testimony submitted to it. It's kind of interesting to read. I would encourage you to read it. And right now it's been deferred. So it's kind of in hiatus. And Onana, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just say that, the testimony that I provided was, in the form of comments only. This bill, in my view, is similar to the exemption that we included in the new rules, but it differs in a couple of big ways. So I did provide, the context for why our exemption was so narrowly drafted and the outreach that we did in terms of rulemaking, and urged the legislature to consider revising or amending the bill so that it reflects the exemption as currently adopted in the rules. I think the biggest thing, and I know Ron has a lot of good info on this too, is, our exemption was really limited to projects that are proposed in non-already designated urban and already zoned for housing. The new bill would actually allow for an exemption from 343 or exclusion, depending on how you're looking at it, on any lands where the general plan contemplates that land being used for housing. And maybe I didn't say that as nicely as others would put it. So Ron, you can go ahead and correct me if I misspoke. So that's kind of where we were. I didn't take a personal position on it. I mean, affordable housing is, people want it. But again, this, even if you folks recall, when we went through rulemaking, it was a hot topic, right? And some folks, I think the way we really got folks to stomach the exemption is that it was so narrowly drawn. And so that's basically what my comments were on that.
I got to say, objectively, Onana's comments were brilliant. It was really well written. It was clearly thoughtful. So I would encourage you to no matter what we do, take a look at the testimony. Some of it to be expected, but some of it was quite good. Any comments on this? Anybody want to propose we take post either comments or testify support or an opposition?
Do we have a feel, sorry, Maka'ala, just do we have a feel, you said it's deferred as of now, but do we think it's going to move?
Well, as of, let's see, it's right here. As of the 15th of February, it was recommended for deferral. As far as I know, it was scheduled by HSG and EEP and finance, and it's just been deferred. So I can't answer that. I don't know.
Thank you.
Anybody have any insight into that? No. So
I don't have insight into that, but I did have a comment about itself. I thought that, well, I thought a lot of things about it. And I talked to a number of legislators about it. And I got some interesting responses from them too. But I think it's flawed in that it asks for two different things that are sort of exclude each other. One asks that affordable housing be excluded from Chapter 343 under certain conditions. In other words, it's one of those things that we don't deal with at all. Like what's the best example, I guess, is renewable energy, right? If it's a renewable energy project, it's excluded from 343, right?
I think certain, are you talking about like certain solar facilities?
Solar facility.
On lands that are, you
On
know,
state land. Yeah, they don't
well,
need to be.
it needs to be not ag lands A and B, I think, right? So there's
Right.
further limits to that, yeah.
But that type of thing, that's what they were looking, that's what it says. The purpose of the act is to do that. And then a few lines down, it says something else. It said that, it says, it would be eligible for exemption from environmental impact statement, environmental assessment requirements. So those are two different things. One is, that is, and I've sort of got it backwards, that's a few lines up, but that it, that, you know, it would be added to our list of conditions. So that, and the condition they asked about was specifically, if it's in the county general plan for housing, or I think a community development plan too, then it would be, that would be added to the other ones that we have. So those are two different asks that they made, one in the purpose and one in the actual bill. And so, you know, what is it that they want? Did they mean to implement the purpose in the language of the bill? Because they didn't. Or did they want the language of the bill to be the purpose? And we discussed this in our previous committee, because it was it's a rules thing. If we're going to change the rules, you know, if we got for hearing, this is something that we're probably going to hear. So I wondered if anybody else had noticed that and thought that if we're going to comment on it, we should at least say that. I'm not suggesting that we comment on it, but I mean, I think it's a fundamental flaw.
Ron, did you submit any official testimony for yourself on this one?
No, I felt that I shouldn't, because I prepare EAs for a living and I've done a number for affordable housing, and you know, it might appear self-serving. So I just tried to provide some background to the legislators and gave them, you know, the benefit of what I understand from having worked on these projects for 30 years.
Mary Alice, there is no hearing scheduled as of yet. It's still in the quote deferred status. We can still submit testimony by sending it directly to the next chair, I assume, right? We don't have to wait until it's scheduled, or?
There's two different types of deferral, Robin. One is deferred indefinitely, which, since we're in the second year of a 2-year session, means that the bill dies at the end of session if it hasn't been brought back off the table, which it can be. But deferred indefinitely by the committee chair means that to bring it back off the table would require the committee chair's approval and then subsequent action by both houses of the legislature to pass the bill. And this one is not even crossing over. So it's very unlikely that it will come back to life, shall we say, this session. I can provide a little bit of background in addition to Ron's. Okay, so I got a call from the two housing chair, Representative Nadine Nakamura, and her vice chair, Troy Hashimoto. An affordable housing developer had approached them and had asked if the exemption in 11-200.1 would allow his project to be exempt from an EA, and it was clear that it wasn't, because he was proposing his project in the state ag district, not in the state urban district. So when he learned that that what he was proposing would not be exempt or eligible for an exemption under the rules as they are currently adopted, he approached the housing chair and vice chair on the House side and suggested that a bill be introduced that would expand the exemption in order to incorporate future affordable housing proposals that he or any other affordable housing developer might be contemplating, and could save money by not having to do an environmental assessment or EIS in the future. We had concerns when they reached out to us, and we expressed them. Tom and Les were involved in that discussion. The bill got introduced anyway. We testified with concerns. They're very similar to Ron's, but not quite as nuanced, Ron, as yours. Ours were simply that this would expand the exemption to include affordable housing projects proposed for the state ag district, which currently require a special permit or a DBA to be processed and approved by the State Land Use Commission. So that was, our concern, and that's kind of the sum of my knowledge of it. But as Robin, as to your point, I believe it's an indefinite deferral, and I don't think it's likely that it'll come back to life this session. That doesn't mean that affordable housing advocates might not try to address some of the concerns expressed in the hearing and come back next year with another version. That often happens, and it may be that they will find something that is acceptable to a broader array of stakeholders, maybe not.
I guess my thinking would be, so we can move on, that Ron, perhaps your very articulate comments would be as comments to the chair of the committee. Since it's not officially moving forward, it might be valuable for them to have your thinking about it. I'm just making a suggestion. You can do with it as my wife does with most of mine. So,
well, Robin, I would be happy to write something up. And Mary Alice, I did see your comments and they were good. I read every comment on there. And let me just real briefly state another point that I wanted to make that was partly made by some of the other commenters, but that's that just because they don't have to do an EA doesn't mean that they don't have to address environmental issues in various forums. If they're an ag district, they're usually going to have to preempt the zoning through a 201H process. They might have to undertake other land use approvals before the Land Use Commission or other county zoning and county planning commissions, which all require environmental analysis. And I said, the EA is the perfect venue to get all that on the table. It's very comprehensive. It's very transparent. People know about it. They participate in it. It's easy to redress grievances through the court system. It's very fair that way. And I said, you know, you're really not getting away with much by not doing an EA. What it doesn't have to be an expensive EA. You can do a less expensive one and just get to the issues. I'd also just real briefly like to state that there are people reaching out and trying to come to some sort of compromise from the other side, from the developer side, because they realize this thing is probably mucky-die dead. So maybe I could ask Mahina to talk about that, because she got involved with it before me.
Sure. Yeah, I asked Ron to come because of his expertise on all of this. So I initially got invited by Wayne Tanaka of the Sierra Club for a quick meeting with Representative Nakamura, a whole bunch of folks, just kind of as a starting point for discussion about environmental concerns. So I just was invited because of being on the council. So I was trying to remember, you know, our discussions around coming up with these provisions when we were doing the rules amendment process, but that felt like forever ago, COVID time warp. I was looking at my notes, you know, and also remembering that we got some really good input from people like Marty when she was at Sierra Club and other folks. And that, so in that initial meeting, I basically shared with them that we were very intentional and strategic when we came up with that language. And that such a blanket exemption would kind of undo that work.
Let me make a
in short,
suggestion,
yeah.
if I can. Because it's deferred and probably did, and it is the end of 2 years, rather than the council submitting something, perhaps Ron and Mahina would share something as individuals and submit it as comments so that it's on the record. I mean, you both are very knowledgeable and you feel strongly about it, just like Onauna did. And just again, to move us forward, maybe if you two would draft up something, you could submit it as joint comments. I think that would be very valuable for the record. And my sense is that it would technically go to the chairman of the committee, of Housing Committee. If that's okay with everybody, and my sense is because it's deferred, we're not going to submit testimony as a council. Can we move on to the next bill? Is everybody okay with that? We got consensus on that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next bill is 1803, HB 1803, which proposes a constitutional amendment. This was one of the bills that Senator Gabbard was very enthusiastic about. It's got a companion bill, Senate Bill 2962. There was a hearing on the 18th, JDC, it passed, lots of testimony. As you saw, I found DLNR's opposition quite interesting. Any thinking from us about this constitutional amendment?
I guess I'll start. I mean, I didn't get a chance to look at this one yet or read the testimony, but I mean, how is this constitutional amendment different from the rights already in the Constitution?
A lot of testimony about that very fact and some of the opposition. The bill has legs. I mean, it's been moving. So
Robin, could you share DLNR's opposition? Do you remember that? Why?
No, I would just encourage you to go look at it, Steph. It's I mean, I can pull it up here, but it's yeah, pretty thorough. But yeah, they were, and it was one of the first ones that I read. So so any thinking about this? Is this something we want to take a stand on? Is this something individuals feel strongly about?
The only thing I'd like to insert, just because I know it, there is an organization called Rights of Nature that has been proceeding with these kinds of rights pertaining mostly to rivers, and has been successful in other places like Australia, we've had some pretty aggressive queries for Hanalei. And one of my arguments against that movement is that our Constitution is better than most when it comes to, you know, the environment and the rights of culture and traditional practices and da and, you know, all of that stuff. And they seemed to be completely unaware of that fact. And I wonder if, I don't know, do legislators have to read the Constitution? Because it's pretty clear the protections that are there. I would assume DLNR would comment that it's unnecessary, redundant, we got this already. I'll read it too and see what else is there, but Gabbard knows all that. Why would he be such a proponent? He really knows that. So
Yeah,
I'm a little taken aback by his support and what I generally do in those situations, because I'm lazy, is I call him and say, what up, you know? What are you trying to address that is not currently being addressed? What are the threats you see?
The companion bill is going to have a hearing tomorrow. So it's moving forward in both houses. I would encourage you to read the testimony. Is your sense, anybody have a feeling one way or the other about the EAC taking a position or just offering comments? Okay, then if that be the case, I'm going to move on. Nana, you stop me if you want to stop me. The next bill is HB 1810. This is a really interesting one. This is a result of a conversation Onana and I had with Rep. Lowen and Senator Gabbard. And Onana, there's been a lot of testimony on this. OPSD submitted testimony. Onana submitted testimony. I helped OPSD in writing some of that testimony. It's coming to finance tomorrow, and we submitted this morning some testimony in support of this. I mean, it's a bill we asked for, and it's, I think, very important to us. So it's been submitted. That the deadline for submittal of this was 1 o'clock, which is when we start to meet. So we had to submit it in time. I've also submitted personal testimony to Chair Luke, in addition to testimony we submitted as a council. And the reason I did that was because Rep. Lowen asked us to help, suggested that for this bill to move, we needed to contact finance, since that's where it is sitting now. Onana, you want to add anything to that lengthy conversation of mine? Sorry.
No, it's just, you know, we like Robin said, submitted testimony, showed up at the hearing. You know, I think people kind of understand where we're coming from in terms of wanting to make sure that we can do our business, even if we're not fully appointed. So yeah, like Robin said, we went ahead and submitted testimony again right ahead of this meeting. At the end of this, you know, we will ask you folks to hopefully ratify the decision to do so. I will plan to be at the hearing in person tomorrow, because I think for bills that we've specifically requested from the legislature, it's important to have, you know, council member physically there. So I don't think we need, unless anybody has questions on this. And just so you know, we proposed 2 amendments to Senator Gabbard and Rep. Lowen, and they were able to get this one together. One was to either amend Chapter 92 for all boards, or to amend our particular statute just for us. So they chose to go with just amending our particular statute. So yeah, hopefully we can get this passed, so we just don't have to worry about not only quorum to hold meetings, but also to do business. If you folks recall, in the certain times, you also need, you know, a minimum number of members based on the number appointed to even constitute, you know, the majority of the vote, right? So I think this will help us all around.
And off topic, but very relevant. I'm assuming all of you know that there are now 4 pending nominees Onauna's conversation with boards and commission, and our letter to the governor through Rep. Lowen and Senator Gabbard's conversation, I would like to think helped move that forward. So we now have 4 very good nominees just simply awaiting their confirmation. But it's still relevant that this bill. And I just a step back before we go on to the next one. What a strong sense of support for the EAC, that we were able to get legislators to propose legislation to make our work better. And I think that, there's a thank you coming at the end of this for both of them. Okay, HB 1874 is the next one. This is the retreat bill, and it's OPSD wrote some support. Common Cause opposed it. OIP, which I found really interesting, opposed this, saying that basically it was unnecessary. This was to allow a retreat once a year outside of essentially sunshine. Any comments? Mary Alice, you want to say anything about this one, or Onauna?
What's the bill number again? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, HB 1874.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and add. So I showed up to testify at this one as well. A representative from Board of Regents, Ben Kudo, was there. He testified in support. It was interesting to actually sit in on the hearing for this bill because it was all the governmental function bills that involved OIP, and OIP felt pretty strongly that this was unnecessary because a retreat, if we're not taking action in their opinion, is administrative, and therefore we could just go ahead and do it. So, right, yeah, Mary Alice. So, I actually said in my testimony, is like, if that's the interpretation, that's great to know. It would be good to have that confirmed somewhere in writing. So, I mean, now that we're talking about this, Robin, I mean, maybe we don't have to agendize our retreat next month, but it might be okay to just do it. I think, I hope this bill does move because it makes it real clear, for strategic planning purposes. And we're obviously not the only board that interpreted the law that way. And I think, in speaking to our AGs, the opinion was that we needed to agendize it, right? But yeah, again, OIP was pretty staunchly against this bill for that purpose. So just offer those comments.
Yeah, no, that's great, Onauna. Mary Alice, any thoughts or comments you want to add to this?
I'm amazed at OIP because on the one hand, they've been sending us emails in regard to how our agendas are drafting, saying that a member of the general public has complained that they don't provide sufficient information for every agenda item. And their reasoning is that a lawsuit could be filed to invalidate any action for which the agenda does not provide sufficient information for a member of the general public to fully understand the agenda item. And so, of course, we had to cancel 2 meetings and revise our agendas and repost them. And I think I got a little bit hoo-hoo about that. And I said, can you cite a lawsuit that has been filed to invalidate advice to, and after a fairly long pause, I got a very polite and courteous response from the attorney of the day saying, no, there has never been a lawsuit to invalidate advice provided by an advisory body. So, of which both of these agendas were for. So take that as you may. That's a source of irony, I think.
So this bill,
I think Jody wanted to comment, Robin, before
I'm
we.
sorry, I was looking down at my chart. Go ahead, Jody. Excuse me.
No problem, Robin. You're doing a great job. But I just wanted to say, OIP is being cautious, and we've also, my office has also warned us to be cautious because there has been feedback from members of the outside government when there are deficiencies in agendas, which is kind of why we've been told to kind of scrutinize agendas and help work with Les and the committee chairs to try to address some of the issues that have been pointed out to us. So yeah, I mean, knock on wood, there haven't been any lawsuits, but we don't want to be the first one to.
Yeah, thanks Jody for staying on us with that. And I know we still have a lot of tweaks to do.
I think that would apply to executive boards that take action on compensation, grants, loans, and disposition of state lands. I would be extremely surprised if a lawsuit would be filed to invalidate advice.
Yeah, that's a good point, Marielle, especially now since we kind of don't have authority, decision-making authority on those important things, right?
Okay, so 1874, we're talking about, it's been deferred as of the 16th. Anana has testified, this one as an individual, OPSD has testified, OIP has testified as well. Do we want to do anything or say anything on this?
I think we keep monitoring if, because if it does continue to move, I would say let's, renew our testimony and be supportive of it.
Jumping ahead before I go back down the list, one of the things we're going to ask you all is to approve Onana and I having the authority to write testimony on the bills that we've talked about, because we have to move fast as we saw today. So we'll get back to that, but okay, Onana, we'll monitor that. I'll keep that one online. There's one that's not on your chart that numerically I wanted to bring to your attention because it's gotten a lot of conversation. That's HB 1897. And that is, it requires all boards to live stream meetings and archive the recordings online. There's a whole bunch of things in here. I'm sure Mary Alice has seen this. Onana, you've probably seen it as well. If you have your computer, you can pull it up, HB 1897. There's an awful lot of conversation about it because of how much of it, mostly people saying what a burden it would be. And how, go ahead, Onana.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to add, so this bill was actually considered at the same meeting as HB 1874. On this one, I think OIP was actually supported or opposed to the bill. Who was it? Okay, it was one way or the other, but the way that it came up was that, OIP opposed, I think, thinking that it would be too difficult for boards. I didn't submit testimony on it, although I didn't want to jump in, but I thought that was inappropriate since I didn't sign up for testimony. Because I think for our board that would be kind of difficult because it would then require each board or commission to not only live stream, but to host it, right? So for our particular council, I think that would be difficult unless OPSD can and already does do that. And yeah, so OIP was actually kind of against it, thinking especially that for neighbor island boards, it would be difficult. Some of the committee members said that's a very Oahu-centric way of thinking and that, neighbor island boards aren't sophisticated enough to do it. And I think those are kind of, comments that may have been well placed, but also not so much that neighbor island boards or members can't do these things. It's more the agency that has to deal with it administratively. So that got kind of lost in the shuffle. So, maybe if this one does move through, I would almost say we oppose it. For some boards, I think it is important to have a live stream. Some boards and commissions do it via YouTube and they only allow a limited number of people to be on the actual Zoom. Like for us, we don't have that many people that come to these things. We just let them right into the Zoom, not a big deal. But, for other boards, maybe they do, Board of Land and Natural Resources live streams. I don't know if the Land Use Commission does. I think there are certain other boards that do for whatever reason, right? I think it's really board dependent.
Some executive boards have a court reporter that does an actual transcription of the meeting based on a recording. So the recording is available until the transcription is then available to the public. And that gives the public the ability to look at the actual conversation, the language exactly, including sometimes hems, haws, and chuckles. If you've read some of the transcriptions. We testified with strong concerns for the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development because of the size of the amount of server space, memory space that would be required to archive the videos of all of our different advisory board meetings. We thought that this bill may not have taken that into account, looked at the balance between the workload, the server space, the cost of storing forever, and the potential benefit to the public of having the video available forever. So that was our thought on it.
Yeah, and this bill doesn't have a companion. I didn't find anything on the Senate side, but it has moved forward. As of the 18th, it is referred to JHA, which was its second referral. So this is one I think we may want to comment on. It's a huge burden. What do you think, Onana?
Yeah, I would be fine commenting or opposing. I have to admit I haven't read through the bill itself yet, but unless anybody feels in strong support of it, you know, I think this was really drafted without knowing that there are a lot of boards that are fully volunteers and have zero budgets. So I think for us, you know, it is a concern for our particular board. Yeah, go ahead, Mafala.
Thank you for that. I mean, our little itty bitty county government manages to do it, manages to put it, to store it on their own server, etc. But you know, I'm both planning commission and our council meetings are stored that way, and I know that there are some private entities on Kauai that are doing like conversations, especially during COVID, and are just posting all that to YouTube, and you know, the storage is there. And I don't know how long that lasts. I don't know what the different options are for live stream or for storage. Mary Alice, I completely agreed. Storage can be an expensive action, but I don't know. Are there different levels of that? Are there? You know, I mean, I'm just feeling like there's a lot about that I don't understand, and I know that the state offers some of that. You know, the for lack of a better term, the Olelo channels. You know, the local channels like that cover some of these things. So I just don't know what the gradations are. I don't have strong feelings one way or the other, except that I really like the ability to go back and watch the actual meeting and see their expressions, hear the comments that don't make it into minutes, that don't make it into any written record. And they can be very useful either on that subject or in future conversations. You know, we each of us have said, well, I remember the last time, you know, and that information was actually very helpful. So I just raised that caution.
There is a deadline for bills to move forward to their final committee, and I don't see a hearing notice for this one. And I think the deadline is Thursday. So if there isn't one by tonight, this bill is not moving. I'm going to have to leave, Chair, for an executive committee meeting. So my apologies. Yeah,
No problem. Thank you so much, Mary Alice. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mary Alice. Okay, let's agree then on this one, given Makala's thoughtful comments, and that we will follow this one. And rather than oppose it, we will submit comments should that be the case. Is that okay? Everybody comfortable with that?
Yep. Those are good comments, Makala. Thank you. I like that ability to go back and watch boards too. maybe if it's just limited to certain boards, logistics TBD.
Okay, let's go to the next one. This is HB 2256. This establishes a Department of Environmental Protection. This is a Nicole Lowen, one of her priorities. Oops.
And I just realized that the hearing is tomorrow at 1 p.m. and we didn't get a chance to submit testimony on this.
Yeah.
We can try to submit late testimony. Just, I mean, I would say to be supportive of it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sorry we were late on this one, but for me, this makes perfect sense. Especially the way the bill has changed from the way it was written last year. This is a much more, I think this is much more acceptive or responsive to some of the criticisms that it got. It's slower, but I think it's more of a acceptance of the reality of the system. So this is to establish a Department of Environmental Protection in July 2026. Creates a department of a working group to address the logistics required to do this and requires a report by 2025. I think we should support this. I think it's not enough meat to object to yet. So my suggestion, my thinking would be, and please disagree here, this is just me speaking, to write, even though it's late, a letter of support.
Now, I would agree, Robin, but I would also say this might be a very important role for the EAC, that we have a representative on it of some sort, because we should.
On the working group or in the department? Because really what this
working group, on the working group.
Yeah, that's a good point, Makala. We can add that to it.
Would you be willing to be that representative?
No. That looks like a very slow moving train to me. And I'm 73. The other part of it is that's not a hard concrete no, but for right now it's a no. If there's no, let me say it this way, if there's no representation in that working group of any commission board like ours that's doing this kind of work, or a member from a neighbor island, then I would be willing, because that's the voice they always miss. They always miss, and how these things can impact us. And I do see personally a difference between the Kuleana and actions of DLNR and what this purports to propose.
Okay, so just curious, if say this bill goes through and we are writing testimony suggesting that a member of the council be on it, who would that be? I will tell you, I probably don't have time to do that in the council. So, we got to just be real cautious when we make these suggestions that somebody's willing to actually step up to do the work.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. And without knowing, first of all, the time frame could shift. There's a whole lot to shift. So, but we can't not include our voice because we don't have the details. I mean, the last minute, maybe somebody can or can't, and our membership is changing as well. We've got some new people coming on.
Yeah.
If I seriously considered it, it would be after it passed, including a voice from our council, and then fight it out among us.
I'll do it.
Thanks, Dawn.
Well, that's done. Thank you, Dawn. Saved my tail yet again. Dawn's been saving my tail for 20 years.
I'm still young.
You are, yes. Thanks. I can't be voluntold for things, guys. I've got to be real clear about that. I don't have time to join more things. So I'm fine making the suggestions, but I don't want to this passes and suddenly you're like, crap, who's going to do it? So thank you, Dawn.
Yeah.
How about this? If we're going to do this, we have to submit this late. So tomorrow, Makala, why don't you draft up at least a paragraph talking about
No,
the,
we need to submit testimony today. The hearing is tomorrow at 1 p.m.
yeah,
So testimonies are already late, but yeah, I would say, you know, if we're gonna do this, if whoever wants to draft language, get it to us, you know, as soon as the meeting is done. And Robin, I think you and I would have to work through it and try to get that submitted, you know, tonight. And I mean, so I'm gonna be in the, I don't know if this is at the same hearing. Is it at the same hearing as the other 1 o'clock? Because I would suggest whoever is gonna submit it can also be present at the hearing. So I'm already gonna be testifying on the quorum bill. If it's not the same one, somebody else needs to do it. I mean, we could just submit written testimony, but if there are strong feelings about it, you know, it's good to show face since this is Nicole's bill. Yeah, I know it's a lot of just, it's ledge, it sucks. We gotta move real quick.
I would, but I have a meeting tomorrow, so I cannot. Otherwise, I would.
Thanks, Don. So it might just be written testimony only on this one, depending on if it's heard at the same hearing or not. But yeah, I mean, Makala, if you're willing to write up a few sentences, you know, just your thoughts specifically, we can drop that in and Robin and I can work on some language. And if anybody else has specific thoughts they want to add, please get it to us. You know, I would say, you know, later than the earliest I can look at it really is 5 p.m. today, you know, 6 p.m. And then we can throw something together. Robin,
I'll do my level best. I'm walking out of this meeting at 3 into a 3:30. So
sure thing. Thank you.
yeah, and
Well, yeah, let's see what we can get. I mean, we could probably submit it right up until, but I was thinking we get it done tonight, you know.
And I don't think it needs to be rocket science. I mean, it's a generalized statement of, you know, we think this is a valuable goal, a valuable effort, and we support the idea of a working group. And if such a working group is formed, a representative of the EAC we would recommend a representative of the EAC participate.
and neighbor islands. That was 2 things you said that need to be that part of that.
Well, yeah,
Right.
because I always see myself as neighbor island.
Well, how about then if Makala, you just do a quick paragraph for us. Nana, I can help till 5 o'clock, but after 5 I can't. So if we can do it, otherwise we'll just do it tomorrow morning.
Yeah, right after we end here at 3:30, I have to run to a 4. So I mean, yeah, if you can take first shift on it, clean it up, and then I'll take it from there.
Okay. All right. The next one is HB 2454 requires for each draft environmental assessment and draft environmental impact statement, a public hearing in the community directly affected by the underlying proposed action. This one hasn't moved at all. I wanted to raise it to you. Some of us have talked about this amongst ourselves. Is it something anybody feels strongly about that they want us to testify on or comment on?
Well, let me just speak up first. I don't think it's practical and I don't think it's necessary. The EIS part, you know, we already require a meeting now. We already require that exact same language in our rules. So we've got that covered. But it's not a public hearing, it's a public meeting. And what I don't understand is what is the role of a hearing in our, in chapter 343. I'm not a legal expert on this, but it seems like, it brings in a whole nother level of law that we have to comply with, about notice, conduct, procedure. I don't know if it's subject to contested case or whatever that is, but then for the EAs, I mean, I think people don't understand what tiny projects are covered by EAs. And I'm not kidding with the Keiki playground that I brought up earlier for cumulative impacts. A Keiki playground may have to do an EA. And you really want a public hearing on that? I did an accessory room to an Easter seals facility that leases state land. And this is to treat children. And it just was a little too big to fit under the exemption. We had to do an EA for it. A public hearing on that? I mean, public hearings cost tons of money. They take all this time. You have to put notices in newspapers, sometimes hire professional, like a recording staff, because I do public hearings for certain federal projects. It's not a trivial thing.
Well, this bill hasn't even gone to a committee, so I think it would be unnecessary for us to comment on it. It's not going to happen. Both versions of it have not moved at all. So
I guess I would say if it does seem like it's going to move, though, I mean, I'm with Ron. I think we would oppose it. The public hearing needs to be teased out, and for the other reasons that you've raised. I mean, really, I've always personally taken the position that there are no contested cases with Chapter 343. It has its own challenge rights. It's a disclosure document. It doesn't determine the rights. It doesn't grant any permits. It doesn't grant any approvals. So, a full-on, public hearing, if that's what they mean, it doesn't seem appropriate here.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
But we do, but I do know where this comes from. Not this particular bill, but this comes from the same stuff we talked about when we were doing our rules. And Scott went island to island to island. This comes from the frustration that the community doesn't have a voice in some of these procedures. That's what it comes from. And I think we should keep our ears out and our eyes out for opportunities to address that issue. I agree, a hearing is not what the community is asking for. It's just the word they know, right? So if there's another procedure, another process that would address that feeling of exclusion, then we should be makala for that.
Well, they might not be aware of the rule change we made. I mean, it wasn't required until 2019 to have a public meeting for an EIS.
Right. So there's a good thing for I&O, right? So that's a good opportunity for us to whatever we do in our strategic plan too, Robin, that addresses that issue, because that's where a lot of this stuff began.
And don't forget, I mean, even without, EAs don't have scoping meetings, but they have comment periods, right? Which is the statutory public approved process. So 343 is not a process that's completely without public participation.
And I think, although we haven't published a best practice manual or anything, it might be something we think about sometime, but my standard is if there's any level of controversy to an action that extends beyond, like, say, a few neighbors or something, then you should have a public meeting. And for my EAs, I always do.
We can't gauge how everybody else does stuff by how you do stuff, Ron.
No, that's what I'm saying. Maybe we should.
Because you're dead exceptional in many ways.
Well, I always do cumulative impact analysis too, by the way.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, even for certain things that you're doing, even if 343 doesn't require a public hearing, certain permitting processes do, whether that's, consultation with the neighborhood board or, going to the actual agency hearing. Yeah.
So I think we watched this and we clearly would oppose it if it does move. It doesn't look like it's got any strength at all, since it's never even had its first meeting. The next one on the list is the companion for that, so we can pass on that, Senate Bill 2448. So let's go to the next red one after that, which is the last one, and that is Senate Bill 3192. Establishes it within DLNR a visitor green fee. This is another one that Senator Gabbard was strongly in support of. A lot of testimony on it, deferred to tomorrow, I think, if I have if my notes are right. SB yeah, deferred until tomorrow at 10 o'clock. So this is not specifically for us, but it is clearly within our purview to comment if we wanted to. Again, I don't think we can make a 10 o'clock meeting, but have any of you been thinking about or looking at the bills for green fees?
Well, it says the green fee takes effect in 2050.
Well, that I think is legislative shorthand for,
Yeah.
we'll deal with that later.
That's like 20 years. Anyway, I really like green fees, but I think it should be specific to the counties. Because I feel like DLNR is more a line item budget at that point, and it'd probably be, they'd have to hire staff and, you know, accounting and stuff. And I'm just not sure that DLNR is the right agency. I think it should go to the counties or a nonprofit specifically for the county, each county. You know, because the counties, I think, know best what's really going on in terms of visitor issues. My personal-
Amazing by all measures, but I completely concur.
Right.
And I every time somebody's going to form a new commission, I cringe, especially with the word legacy. But you know, in our county, we're pretty clear about where we spend the money. Matter of fact, we are. So you know, our problem has been that people come to this amazing place that you see behind me, and the first thing out of their mouths is, "How can we help you take care of this place?" We've never had an answer other than you can donate to my nonprofit, which frankly, I don't say because it sounds weird. So, you know, if people want to play on the beach and they want to help protect that beach, we should have a way to have that handled. And I agree, that should be, for that part, you know, and in the park part, it could be county. If the state wants to do something for their state resources, that's another conversation, but I completely agree, Don.
So, you know, to be supportive of Senator Gabbard, I mean, it seems like folks are generally in support, but there are some tweaks that would need to be worked out. You know, testimony would be late. I wouldn't be able to go in person, but if you folks want to, you know, submit testimony in support or with those comments that Don and Maka'ala raised, if Don and Maka'ala are willing to just put a couple paragraphs together, I think that's something we can get out tonight as well. Again, it can be very short, just, you know, what you both said was great. It can be 2 paragraphs, if that's doable. I don't know how folks are feeling on this.
Yeah, I mean, I would be glad to help. I think Les just posted that he's got to leave at 4:30, so we may, I'm not sure what shape it's gonna look like. I don't know.
I asked him to send me the Word file with just the formatting
Perfect.
for the council letterhead. Again, yeah, I can't submit stuff till later this evening, but if folks get me drafts, I mean, you know, if it's going to be quick, just, you know, we support but offer the following comments, you know, that stuff we could get out just so that we show support for the legislators that have been, you know, introducing bills for us, really.
Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
Okay, that's it. Are there other bills that are, no?
Yes, I thought that there was, shoot, what is the OHA one?
Oh, the
Thought it was-
socioeconomic one.
Was
Yes,
that
sorry.
not, was that not on here?
Did I skip past it? I thought I was.
Yeah,
1473, House Bill.
1473. Yeah, I thought there was a hearing on that coming up on Thursday. Wait, let me look.
Yeah, that's correct. There's a hearing on Thursday.
Okay. Yeah, can we please talk about that? Because you know, I think, you know, Mahina and I, you're right. No, 1471. SB 20, wait a minute.
There it is.
2121. Yeah, the companion has a hearing on Thursday at 10 a.m. So we'd have to get, you know, testimony in by tomorrow at 10 a.m. on this one. And, you know, I kind of do have some strong feelings on this one, just in terms of, you know, Mahina and I met with representatives from the OHA folks. I think we reported at this at a past meeting. And, you know, what this bill wants to do is to require EISs to consider whether proposed action will exacerbate socioeconomic disparities. So, you know, some of the questions that we raised in that conversation with the OHA folks were, how exactly would you measure an action exacerbating socioeconomic disparities, right? So as you folks all know, one of the things that you look at in an EA and an EIS are socioeconomic impacts, right? So, kind of posed a couple of questions to OHA. One, how is this different from what's already required under the rules? And two, how would you specifically measure a project exacerbating socioeconomic disparities? And Mahina, correct me if I'm wrong, I think some of the things they were looking at were like people's education level and people's profession. And so I have real concerns on how that type of data is being collected. One, within the community, and how do you incorporate that into an EADIS? And Ron, you probably have some real good thoughts on this, but so I'm hesitant to impose restriction or requirements that are already covered, to the extent we think this is already covered under a socioeconomic analysis, or two, adding analyses that are hard to measure. And we did ask them, what kind of studies would you do? How would you get this information? How would you put this in? And they didn't get back to us on that. I think they said they thought there were studies, but at least me personally, I can't be supportive of the bill, not knowing what kind of burden this would put on, state and applicants in doing these documents. So if anybody has any other thoughts, those are my concerns.
I do deal a lot with socioeconomic data,
Mm-hmm.
and there may be people in the room that know more about than I do, and they can correct me if so. But it's very hard to get income and poverty level data on a fine scale. It's collected. Certain measures are collected once every 10 years, and then they quickly become out of date. But they basically look at 3 or 4 measures, and when you get to the finer scales you look at, like if you're dealing with a district or a town or something like that, the sampling error, because they do sampling to get this, they don't ask every single person, becomes extremely large. So you're talking about data that is, say, 20% poverty plus or minus 18%. So it's not very meaningful. And the US government issued an executive order about 20 years ago, the Environmental Justice Order, and all the agencies have struggled to comply with it because it's very difficult to get fine scale data on income. So what they use as a proxy is the US Census Bureau's American Community Survey estimate of poverty with all the error bars associated with it. So unless OHA is going to go out and sponsor finer scale surveys, which I would be in favor of, that'd be great to have that. You can't collect that data without doing your own sampling, and it's prohibitively expensive for individual EAs and EISs to do that.
Thanks, Ron, for that knowledge on that. And anybody else have thoughts?
I would just add that, having been a public school teacher for a number of years, trying to balance socioeconomic issues and stories and experiences and proclivities is difficult, even if you had that data. So the idea is not to build ghettos, right? The idea is to try and provide. I was thinking about this when we were talking about the affordable housing one. If we want to make sure that affordable housing is next to transit, which is one thing they commonly say, why wouldn't we want all housing to be next to transit? Why? So we say the reason is because they're less likely to have their own transportation. Better for the environment, of course, too. But so when I look at this, you want a nice mix. You want to blend. You don't want to build, single experience communities. We talk about that a lot. So I wish I hear you, Ron, and I've tried to do it myself a couple of times. I think where I come down is that it's a great aspiration, but it's practically speaking, not ready for prime time because we just don't have the data? Or does it not need to be data driven? Can you go at it the other way? Not say this is who's there, but this is what these people are like that are there, but these are the people we want to attract, and this is the situation we're trying to foster.
So I have two questions at this point. One, what time are we supposed to be POW on Anna? Is it 3 or 3:30?
3:30.
Oh, okay, so we have a little more time.
Mhm.
There's a little bit of flexibility in this one. This is specifically up our alley. What do we want to do? Do we want to try and submit comments in opposition? I mean, testimony in opposition to this? Anybody?
But at least to the extent that those that are currently experienced with it say that the data is not the data required for definition is not available. I mean, how would you do it? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want anybody to be uncomfortable. I like I said, I have strong feelings on it because it raises a lot of questions. And, you know, if I'm trying to help somebody through the process and say, what does it mean? You know, based on the language of the bill, I don't know, right? You know, how do we provide guidance to somebody conducting an assessment on this and then what is done with it? So, I mean, we could provide comments, we could oppose it, we could say, you know, without knowing X, Y, and Z, we oppose it, but if something changes, you know, I'm not sure how you folks wanna, or if you even want to, if the council as a whole wants to, you know, we do all have to feel comfortable really with the testimony that we're providing.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, you know, you all have made significant points about what data, how do you use it, how reliable is it, how do you measure it? And it's going to come to us as part of the work we do with what's an environmental impact statement. I mean, we just spent 2 years trying to answer that. So I do think we should try and submit testimony to this. Anani, you're the most articulate about it. I mean, I'll be glad to help if you want to just put your thoughts down on paper and we'll finish it off. We have a little bit more time on this one.
Okay. Ron, you're on mute, Ron.
Trying to be nice. I can help on that, Robin, too.
Good.
Thanks,
you
Ron.
know, and maybe just express our, you know, express our deep concerns about the practicality of the bill as written.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. If you draft up something, Ron, and maybe share it with Anana, and then I can jump on it tomorrow. We'll figure that one out.
We have to do that tonight?
Well, yeah, we got to submit before 10 a.m. or it's considered late.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have a little bit more time on, I mean, the other testimony we talked about today, it's going to have that big ugly red stamp on it late, you know, so I just hate that. But if it's late, it's late. For this one, I think I put it on my calendar to actually be there to, you know, testify, because I don't want it to seem like, you know, we're just opposed to it. But Mahina and I had the conversation, we raised these issues with the OHA folks, you know, the bill went forward. And I'll add one more thing that does give me concern, and maybe Ron, you may or may not have concerns with this, but the reason for really drilling down on what does it mean for a project to exacerbate socioeconomic conditions. If you are exacerbating it, you then have to provide mitigation measures, and whatever permit you're going in are now going to have some kind of mitigation condition, probably, right, for that. So I'm just unclear on, you know, what a mitigation measure would look like where a project comes in. And, you know, if you're talking about people's profession or long-term earnings, you know, to me, I still haven't quite connected the dots on how that plays out. So those are the kind of things I have concerns about. And if these are misplaced concerns, please anybody speak up. But that's just the way I'm kind of thinking, you know, with how these documents are used, right? If you have significant impacts, you need to mitigate them. And how do we mitigate, socioeconomic inequalities.
I have actually dealt with that in EISs before.
Yeah, okay.
And it's not easy because there's a lot of unenforceable things, but there is concern about some of the communities and on the Big Island, and I know every other island has the same thing, that our exclusive enclaves are the rich, and all the places you used to go fish or hang out are now, Mark Zuckerberg is going back with his electric foil back and forth. And what do you do? I mean, they raise the tax revenues dramatically. They're required to put in parks and other things. So in many ways, they're their own solution to the problem. And yet nobody's really happy with all that. Even with all the dedicated public parking spaces and the increase in the tax base and the new park and the this and the that, it doesn't make people happy. How do you, you didn't know you were poor until a bunch of billionaires moved in next to you. And it's a really tough, it's a real thing. I don't know how to answer it though.
Yeah. No, thank you for that insight.
Okay. Are there any other bills that anybody wants to raise that we've missed? It's a full plate. There's a lot of action this year. Okay, we need to have a vote. There's as the agenda says, to approve the legislative committee chair and or council chair to submit testimony and or comments on behalf of the EAC. I'll stop it right there.
So moved.
All right. And really, we're looking at the positions that we discussed today, right? For the bills that were discussed today.
Right.
Okay. All right.
And it also said, including the nominations of new EAC members. I didn't make that part of the motion. Do you want that to be in the motion?
Yeah, I think go ahead, because the point was that if and when those GMs come up, I just don't know when we're going to have our next meeting, right? We may want to, presumably, I guess let's talk about it real quick. Would anybody be opposed to us submitting testimony in support of those nominations? And I know I don't have the GM numbers right now, but we talked about it at a previous meeting. That typically happens in March. I think that those GMs get hearings, if I recall correctly, right?
So let's make the motion, the whole language that is in the agenda.
Okay.
If that's okay. So it would be move to approve the legislative committee chair and or council chair to submit testimony and or comments on behalf of the EAC for those bills agreed upon on the legislative tracker and others that the EAC approves, including nominations of new members. I changed the language just a bit.
Fine.
Ron, will you second that again?
I move it, yes.
Second.
Okay.
All right. Any further discussion on that? All right. Any testimony from, Tessie, are you raising your hand? No, okay. Any testimony or questions, comments from members of the public? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All right, none opposed, it's unanimous. All right, thank you folks so much. I know that was a really big substantive meeting, and if there are other bills that come up, that you folks are finding that aren't on Robin's list, go ahead and, just shoot them an email and we can kind of start to track those. So crossover is happening after Thursday?
I think Mary Alice said Thursday, but I have the calendar somewhere on my computer here, so.
All right. Thank you so much, folks. So next meeting will be April 5th. We're looking at 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. for, this will be our retreat meeting. And then a break from 1 to 1:30 and starting the afternoon session from 1:30 to 3:30. Correct, Robin? Yep. And then I'll work with Ron and Robin for the agendas. We'll, no committee business except for really quick exemption committee business on that day.
The calendar says that the first crossover is March 10th. First decking is the 4th. So there's a recess going on. So anyway, we can find out. Okay.
All right. Thank you for anything else, public forum? Anything else that we need to talk about? So everybody who agreed to help with drafting some testimony, thank you folks so much. Go ahead and get those, to Robin and I as soon as you can, so we can get stuff submitted tonight. And then I think for that the OHA bill we talked about, we'll work on it to get it submitted no later than 10 a.m. tomorrow for the hearing on Thursday.
I sent mine to Les already.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all your folks' hard work and everything on this. Legislative session's always crazy. All right, anything else, folks? All right. If not, we'll go ahead and adjourn at 3:08 p.m. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you folks in April.
Lovely.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Les. Thanks, Jody.
Thank
Okay,
you.
guys.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. all.